All right, Gabrielle.
Hi.
Gabrielle, where are you from originally?
Central Texas.
What city is that?
So Erath County, Hood County area. Stephenville is like the big capital of it, and there's not that many people there. But I grew up in a really much smaller town that was like, well, if you had to go in the city, like you're there all day, and then you go home. But I grew up on a farm, ranch, I guess more to say. We had tons of cattle, animals, and grew up with my both parents and my sister.
How would you describe your childhood?
Tornadic. Really, it's more of an emotion. I think of like my little self. I mean, it's obviously still in me, but very. I knew I was going to be emotional, but I didn't think it would be this soon. Just very scared as a kid. Really trying to do my best every day, and that's my motto still. But having to be put through a lot that a child shouldn't have to see or take care of. My mom, she was sick from my time of birth. I always say that maybe me coming into the world caused her to be a little bit more unwell than she already was.
Are you an only child?
No, well, my sister, we have separate parents, separate dads, but we were raised the same together. She was more my mom than my mom was. So we were both caretakers of her. She's 4 years older than me. And then when my mom ended up passing away, it even, I bonded even closer with my sister because she became the full parental figure and my dad left. And, trauma is for sure like the root cause of everything wrong with my family line. All of it, grandparents, great-grandparents, you hear these horrible stories. At least I was as a kid. Like my mom, we were like her only friends. She was bedridden from when I was a little kid.
What were her issues?
Oh, physically, she had like a paralyzed stomach. We don't really know what the true problem was. She could not digest food. She had all of her colon removed. She didn't have a bowel movement for like 2 years. Like should have killed her, wrapped around her heart, gave her a heart attack. That's how they found out, like, oh, something is really wrong. She was diabetic, had heart failure, mental illness. I think it was hand in hand with the physical and the mental. Bipolar. She wasn't ever diagnosed though by like a psychiatrist or someone who can. It was like our general doctor in the middle of nowhere. And he would just, oh, I think you have this. Here's medication for this. Oh, it's not working. Let's give you this pill. So she literally had a tackle box, like 4 layers of pills that she would take every single day. And it was like, morning you would take the top layer and go down. I think that she had multiple personalities or DID. I think that was the main problem. And maybe bipolar too. Incorporated with it, maybe borderline personality.
Her behavior would change?
Vastly. I would say it was the worst in my most pivotal time, 3 to 7, those years. She was scared. So of course that, brings fear to the child. She was scared of everything. She was very like Southern Baptist, the end of the world is coming, so let's meal prep. Let's build this house and have a chapel in the middle of the house. It was like a cement room, had pews, had a little altar thing for the pastor, which would be her, I guess. And that was like our doomsday prep. So she had like canned foods and like stuff that you can mix with water, clickable flashlights that are, handheld just in case like the end of the world happens.
So there's a religious element to this as well?
I think most of it, the fear about the world ending and how people are so evil it was always demonic, right? It was always, oh, it's not because their parents messed them up. It was because Satan is in them. And so she started doing that, and then she was a hoarder as well. So she, from a child, didn't have a lot of anything. She grew up very poor, abused by her family as well. And so she took that and was like, okay, well, I need everything. And whatever I can't have, I'm going to give to you. So what do you want, clothes? Do you want all the sweet stuff in the world, all the candies, all the cakes? And I didn't realize as a child, like we were struggling for money because she would it was whatever I wanted, here you go. But it wasn't ever the emotional sense. It was like, You want a little Debbie? Here you go. Do you want a new pair of jeans? Here you go. And it's so sad to think like the financial ruin she put my dad in. And I think that if she would have gone to true help and not just like the general doctor that she was going to, it would have changed her trajectory of life. I don't think she would have had all the health conditions. I think they are all rooted from the deep trauma from her past as well.
So this lasted until when?
She passed away when I was 15. I always say 14, but she was 15. I was 15. She had her final heart attack. I mean, no child should ever have to find their parent dead. I had gone to school, and I have always been very intuitive, like known that things, I don't know if I'm gonna have a good day or a bad day. Or walking to school, it was 2014, and it was just like rainy and it was foggy, and I was like, oh, today's not gonna be a good day. And I really struggled with telling my mom I loved her. I did. Like I lived to keep her alive. That was really my goal. And I texted her in the middle of the day, and I was like, I love you. Like, I hope all's okay. And I didn't hear her back. I was like, oh, maybe she's sleeping, because she also didn't sleep. Like, you know, you hear like stories of drug addicts like staying up for 6 days at a time, and it's like she didn't sleep for months at a time. I don't know if it was psychosis, if it was the medicine she was taking, but I was like, oh God, I hope she's sleeping, because she's always nicer when she slept. And so come home and she was in bed, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll go eat with my dad after school. And we came home, and she was just in the bathroom on the floor. And the first thing I thought of wasn't, let me call like help or 911. It was, I get to live for myself. And I felt so selfish and so upset with myself that was the immediate reaction. It wasn't, oh my God. It was, oh, I get to be myself. Because I became very good at lying as a kid. When you have a parent who is emotionally unwell and unstable and, you know, physically abusive, you learn how to be the perfect child. And my dad had a real big problem with the way I behaved after she died, because I became this kind of rambunctious teen who, for the first time, doesn't have to take care of anybody and can just be a teenager. And on top of having a brain injury right before that, too, I really had like all this new lease on life. And I don't think my dad was capable emotionally to handle teenage girl. So I went to live with my sister after that. But my mom, it's been a long time since I've been able to like say anything kind about her. She was beautiful. She was great. The mom that at least I knew, I try to look at the memories and pictures that I've seen where she was a very kind person. I think too, sometimes when people have children, all of their unresolved issues really pile up, and it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to do the things that my parents did to me, but I'm just going to do it to you differently. And it's interesting, you know, all the stories she told me growing up about how she was abused and how she had these abusive relationships. My life has started to alter that, or did alter that, until I, you know, made a choice. Like, I'm not going to be like that. I'm gonna change it. I'm gonna be better. Because I can very much see that I was going in the exact same path, and I think the universe, whatever, was like, maybe there's something better for you. I didn't listen for a long time, but I'm glad that I finally did. Yeah.
And so you graduated high school?
I did graduate high school. I struggled in high school a lot. I had to move my senior year because my mom had died, and then moved in with my sister. I always looked to my teachers to be like my mom as a kid. So I was always like the best in class. I always really, you know, called them mom. I was always trying to show up and go beyond, because I needed love that I wasn't getting at home. But I think my biggest problem in school was having my brain injury. Seeing like a whiteboard with like black marker is still very hard for me to be able to look at. and I was just so fatigued and tired. But I got through it. And then when I moved schools my senior year, that's when things got really, really tough. I started abusing alcohol. I had a boyfriend at the time. That's kind of how my life is too. It's like I have these boyfriends, or did, kind of like my mom. And it's like I end up following suit of them and then really ruining my life, and then going to the next one who's very different, and it's like, oh, well, this is a saving grace, and it's the same shit. But abused alcohol really, really bad. And I think that was like the turning point in my life when I was 18. I remember so vividly, I've tried committing suicide twice. The first was when I was 14, the second one when I was 18. The first one was right after I had brain surgery. And they were like, well, you can't do anything, really, ever. We hope that, you'll be able to have like a good life, but we don't know really what to expect. You might wake up in 3 days and, not be able to talk or walk, or in 10 years from now, we have no idea. And so,
The brain injury happened at what age again?
14. So it was 6 months before my mom died. From like 14 to 18, I don't know what happened. It was hell. That was truly the worst years of my life, and maybe 3 to 7. But there's these huge chunks. It's always like 4 years at a time. It's a freak accident. I was running with my friends in the park where I grew up, and we were playing tag. And I see my friend. He's running. I chase him, and I was like, oh, he fell. So I get to play, tag him, and didn't think maybe he fell over something. So I fell over cable wires in a parking lot, and then I hit my head on a concrete car block stop, like where the car doesn't go over. And you think when you hit your head that hard, like, oh, you knock out. But it's these moments of peace. I did not lose consciousness, but I definitely was not in my body. I can remember everything as if like I'm looking down at myself, but I'm in this like very peaceful space. And I don't know if I don't necessarily believe in like heaven, but I don't know, maybe it was just like a peaceful state, I don't know, to pull myself out, or if it was my body's reaction, like in trauma times where you're dissociating. But I can see myself like in pain and just like hurting, and I'm really confused because I'm like, well, I'm fine up here, but like, why am I not good down there? So they had to be care flighted to Cook's Children, which is in Fort Worth, and had immediate brain surgery. I had a subdural hematoma, which is a blood clot in my head, and it's about that big, like a softball, on this side of my head. And I actually hit this side, but the force was so bad that the blood clot was on this side. I fractured my skull. My neck obviously had whiplash, tore some ligaments and tendons, was in a neck brace for 6 weeks. They opened my head, took out the blood clot, patched me up, didn't shave my head, which I was very grateful for. And I had a drain tube for several days in the ICU afterwards. But went to the surgery, anesthesiologist put me down, and I was back in my body, but I don't remember it. And the moment I woke up from surgery, this like white space that I was in was totally gone, and it was like a like the best way I can describe it is like a vacuum, like being sucked back in my body, to the most debilitating pain, feeling, sensation that I've ever felt. Hopefully I never feel that way again, because it was hopeless. I still had a tube down my throat for ventilation. I could see, the blood out of my eye down through my head. And I wasn't able to, I don't think, fully express like the way that I was feeling to doctors or my parents, because still my mom was alive. So I was like, well, I still have to take care of her. I don't get to have the moments to be sick. I don't get to have this time to heal or even address that I'm not okay. So wasn't there for very long, probably a week or so in the hospital. Went home, and sitting in my bed, I had like a hospital bed at home where they could lift me up. My sister had to shower me during that time because I wasn't able to move around. And after she like left, I was like, well, this is it. Like, I'm done. So I took like a handful of like depression meds that I was taking at the time, and like some Advil. And I really thought I was gonna do it, and it didn't. And I woke up and I was like, well, I guess I better like fix myself or like be good for my mom while she's alive. And then she died. And I was like, well, then all these things. And back to being 18, it kind of all came to like a head right then. I still hadn't been in therapy for physical or emotional for my head injury, for my mom dying, for my dad getting remarried very shortly, like 6 months after my mom died, and then getting kicked out, and then the abuse that I endured during relationships with my partners during that time too. 18, it was like, well, this is it. I remember going to a party with my friends, and this is back when like Four Loko was like a really big drink. It might still be. Remember I had 3, and I was like, that's gonna do it. And it didn't. I don't know what happened, if alcohol poisoning is fixable on itself, but I have never been sicker from alcohol in my life. I was sick for like 4 days, puking, throwing up, and still stuck in this like depressive state. And very shortly after that, thank God, whoever, a fellow Mark is his name. He is my sister's dad. He's who got me into yoga, and man, I credit him for changing my life for sure. I'm very grateful for him, because I really don't think I would be here if it wasn't for these really good people that I have in my life. Angelic humans, per se, and there's always help there, but maybe I just didn't see it growing up. But yeah, he definitely helped pave the way for this piece, and yoga has been such a beneficial everyday activity, from just mindfulness, being aware, and believing that I can do things, that I'm not have a disability. I can do things that I never thought would be imaginable. I don't get sick like I used to. I don't get headaches like I used to. It's, you wouldn't think and look at me and think I have a brain injury. And I accredit that to a daily practice of something. And that's amazing. And yoga, there's definitely been some bad times that I have found through it. But for the most part, it's been very good.
How old are you now?
I'm 25.
25.
Yeah.
And your life you're doing much better now.
Oh, God, I'm doing so much better. I mean, thank the Lord, whoever, whatever. I still have all these old sayings from when I was a kid, thank God. But the last year, I opened up my own business, and I got out of some really, I was in a cult for 3 years. Got out of that to open my own business. And there's always healing to be done, right? And interesting about, I was saying the 4-year mark timeline. If I would have stayed another year, who would have knows, what would have happened to me? But I got out in the 3-year, opened up my own space.
What kind of cult?
So it wasn't a yoga cult. There are some, absolutely. It was a spiritual cult. Started pre-COVID, but then when COVID started, it totally changed. I don't know if that was always the intention of the place. I started there as an employee, as a job. I was a yoga teacher there, and they had this little mystical feel in small town Texas, and it's no one has that. So anyone who's got any other views other than Southern Baptist Christianity, there's a place I can go that's not gonna reprimand me or judge me for all these other beliefs that I may have. And I was this is the coolest place ever. Wow, I can't believe this is open. I get to meet people who really treat me like family, and really believe that I'm a good person, because I struggled with that for a long time too. And so I stayed there from 2019 to maybe 8 months later, and then COVID happened, obviously. They shut down for a little bit, and then they opened back up. They're hey, you want to come back and teach yoga? Because we don't have any teachers anymore. And I was oh yeah, because I don't have a job. I was supposed to move. I was supposed to go do all these other things, and then, the world, whatever. I was I guess I'll do this for now. And at first, I always, again, being very intuitive my whole life. My first instinct of a person has always been right. And I don't know if this is some crazy, whatever it is, I need to start really listening to it. But the first time I went to this place, my stomach hurt, and I was ooh, this is not a good vibe. And the first time I met a teacher there, I was this is not good. But I was told, through time that, oh, the reason why I'm having these reactions is because I'm just not evolved enough. And that if I stay here and learn these lessons, that I will become a truly enlightened, good person. I was like, oh my God, okay, this sounds good. This is what I need. And I was 19 at the time. And of course, what happens when you're 19? You don't know the world at all. Nothing stays when you're 19. And so I really embedded myself in the teachings and just wanting to do better. I think that was what everyone wants to do, is be a better person, be a better human. And looking back, there's so many things that I wish I would have stopped and said, I'm out, I've got to leave. But the big preface is they had these circles, right? You would sit and you would tell your terrible life stories like this. But they would use it against you. So they wanted you to be so open and vulnerable. And obviously I have a deep mom wound, and the abuse, physical, emotional, that I suffered from her. It was almost replicated from one of the teachers as okay, well, now you're my daughter. And it became a very unhealthy relationship between the two of us. It was that was my best friend, it was my boss, there was no clear boundaries, and it was constant, the phone, just all the time. I was always needed, there was always something to do. And then there was this other teacher who was definitely more into the most wild teachings. For example, we're sitting in these circles one day and we're doing this breath work to get over something, get over trauma. And it was based on the sacral chakra, which is sexual trauma. And I knew I had sexual trauma. I went to therapy when I was 19, so this is a year later. So I had just recently uncovered my own abuse. And so I'm sharing it in the group, and I was I'm having a really hard time. I'm with this person, and it keeps getting brought up in, our day-to-day lives, and I don't know how to get over it. And I'm, seeking advice. And as I'm saying this, heartfelt, and a young woman talking about her being raped, and the teacher is just smiling. And I'm thinking maybe this is endearing. Maybe she's about to give some really positive message. And she silence, the room, there's 30 people in this place. And she says to me, why do you think you got raped? And it was, God, first of all, who says that? And under any circumstances, doesn't matter. And I just was dumbfounded. I'm sure it seemed like I was silent for 7 minutes. I'm sure it was a few seconds. And she goes, no, tell me, why do you think that happened? I said, because bad shit happens sometimes. There's not always a reason for it. And she goes, well, you just have to be okay that you raped someone in a past life, and it's just karma coming back to you. And at the time, I was so mad and so just hurt, and I cried and I laughed, and I was I'm never fucking coming back here again. And of course, the other teacher, who was my mom, viewed herself as my mother, was I'm so sorry, but whatever makes you feel unhappy, you have to work through it. I was okay, another lesson. Let's just keep building lessons. So it was I was putting myself in these traumatic instances that didn't need to happen in order to heal. And it wasn't just these circles too. It was these events where you would go and not sleep or eat for 3 days. And you're supposed to have these spiritual experiences, and I'm not having them. I'm just mad, and I'm what is going on? I don't believe this. Something is not right. And again, it was well, here's another lesson that you need to get over and get through. And that still wasn't enough for me to leave, spending 3 days out in the freezing cold, not having water, not having a food source until the last day, and not being able to sleep. What does that do? That causes psychosis. It's not healthy. No one needs to do that to have a good life, And it, thank God I left. And it was just, I think, a pivoting point, really based on finances, where I was I have got to do better for myself. And I'm very thankful that page is over. But there's still days where I think back to some of the things that they said to me, and the things I even just allowed myself to be in, because cults are so common. It just takes a narcissistic plural or singular individual to like lead a group. Like that's all it takes. Even like a narcissistic relationship, that's considered a cult. Have you ever heard of the NXIVM cult?
I have not.
It's fascinating. Keith Raniere, he's like the leader of it. He's in prison. But that's like the best way I can describe that is it's like a self-help group. And you have like these levels that you want to achieve in yourself. And the basis of it looks really good. But then when you start learning deeper, it's like, oh, that's weird. But it's still not weird enough for you to leave. And it's like they just keep kind of feeding you little bits of peace and goodness until there's a breaking point. And man, just crazy. And I don't know if that was like in my path or I chose that. I find too that a lot of people who found their way into this place were just like me. They were struggling with abuse. They suffered from abusive mothers and they had sexual abuse. And it's like, you know, tell as old as time, everyone's traumatized. No one has a perfect life. There's always something that happens and, you know, makes us or breaks us. And they pry on that. And it's so upsetting to think about all the people that maybe it's still happening to. And I just know that if my mom was like still around, she'd be like, dude, what did you get yourself into? Like, that's nuts. I didn't teach you any of that. But my mom, going back to that, God bless her. I feel so sad that she was so sick for so long. And even just like a manifestation, if that was the illness from her mind going into the body, because I said she had a paralyzed stomach, it looked like she was 9 months pregnant. And she had lost, I think, 4 children through miscarriages, 3 or 4. And so just being stuck in the state of like having this really swollen belly, but like skinny otherwise. And that's what you see every day in the mirror. And I don't know if that made her switch every time she would look at the mirror, because it wasn't just a every day. It was like a once in a blue moon. Eyes would darken, and then it was a completely different person. And she had like 2 different identities. One was definitely like a small toddler or like a baby, and she would always try to run away. And again, we lived out in the middle of nowhere. And she definitely had other relationships other than my father during their marriage. And every time she would try to run away, she would try to go to this other guy that she was seeing, and it would call out his name. And I just thought he was a friend at the time. I didn't know any better. So he would have to come calm her down. I mean, would run out. She would be gone sometimes for hours, come back with like scraped knees, tattered clothes, and would have no idea because we had, you know, acres and acres of land. So who knows how far out she would go. And that was just like a very scared version of her. And then that wasn't bad because that never really affected me. It was the I'm going to kill you version of herself. And just rooted maybe in hatred for her abusers, that she would unleash it. I've always been a very, I don't know, talkative kid, back talking, I guess. And I would always run my mouth. And one day I guess she just had enough, and so she's like, pick your weapon to be hit with. And it was either like belt or spoon. And I remember picking up a plastic like ladle, because I'd never been hit with that yet. And it was like the last utensil. I was like, maybe this won't hurt as bad. And I thought it'd be like a one spank. But again, eyes turned, and it turned into like a full body from like shoulders to feet. And I was covered in welts for like days. Couldn't go to school. My mom, she wouldn't know what she did until she saw the effect afterwards. I mean, just getting beat black and blue. And she changes, she like shifts, she drops the spoon, and she just looks at me, and she's like, you can't go to school. And that's the only thing she said. And so I stayed at home for days, and I loved staying at home because I was like, oh, I get to take care of Mom. I get to be with my favorite person, because that's all you know as a kid is your parents. And as like fucked up as they are, you want them to love you, and you want them to like be so proud of you. Everyone faces that. I was like, okay, I'm gonna be the best caretaker of my mom today that I can. And just so many other, you know, abusive rampages she would go in, like back to that chapel I was talking about. I was always so scared of tornadoes as a kid. That's why I say my childhood was like a tornado. Of course, Texas, what happens? Tornadoes. And I think my dad was on a trip somewhere with his family, with his friends, and my mom, I was probably 4 or 5. I don't know if I was in school yet. Maybe I was. And she was like, there's a tornado. We have to prepare for it. And I was like, oh, okay. So we all go into the chapel, which is me. I don't remember my sister being there, but she had to have been. Maybe if she was in school. And then our pets. And mind you, my mom was a hoarder of all things. So animals, we had like 35 dogs at one time, inside and outside. Crazy and not cool. So we're all like piled in this place, and we go to sleep, and it feels like I was in there for several days. It could have been a few hours because it's a child time. No one knows. There was no clock in there. But we're eating like the prepared meals. We're like winding up our flashlights. We're peeing in a bucket and take a little nap. I wake up. She's like, the house is gone. We have to stay in here until your dad gets home. And I'm so terrified. You know, little me, I'm like praying on my knees, like at the chapel. And I'm like, God, if you just save me and save this house, like, you know, I always gave ultimatums. I was like, I'll stop sucking my thumb. Like, I thought that was so bad of me to do as a kid. And I've always like shook when I was scared. And that's still a thing I do. Like if I'm really nervous, like I will definitely like visually shake. And that's like the first memory I have of that is just sitting there, just shaking in the pew, eating this like, I don't know, Chef Boyardee canned soup. And then my mom, I don't know what she's doing, if she's taking a nap or doing something else. I open the door and the house is still fucking there. And of course it is, because no tornado would have come in. I would have heard it. As a child, you don't know, and you believe your parents and everything they say. And nothing was ever said about that. Again, I never told my dad. I never told anybody. And it wasn't until recently that I've been writing a book too about my life, because there's so many stories that I've been like really uncovering all these old memories. And it's fascinating how we keep them and we hide them in our brains until we're ready for them to come out. Like in therapy, when I was 19. I had been in therapy for a long time as a kid. But I hadn't uncovered that I had been sexually assaulted when I was 17. So right in that middle of those 4 years as a teenager. And my therapist just looks at me because I'm shaking. And she's like, what's going on? Like, you're talking about something that's not related to like this feeling that you're having. Like, have you been assaulted? And it was just like Pandora's box opened. And it wasn't just even that memory that came back. It was like all these other things from my childhood that weren't sexually abusive, but abusive in other senses. And thank God I had started doing yoga then, right? Because I don't think I could have handled, the next phase of my life to come if it weren't for that. But I was so ready to heal and so ready to like get over my own nonsense, because obviously, like, people have done terrible things to me, but I've also not been a great person for a lot of my life. People think that they're perfect, or, you know, it's like, well, me, I'm a victim. It's like, no, like, I've definitely made my own choices. No one told me to go to the cult. No one said it was a cult. I chose to go. No one forced me into these relationships that I, got myself into, and they were always a choice. But I think it was a choice based out of, I wanted my mom to love me so bad, so I chose men that were very similar to her in rage and in abuse and just the flip-flop of emotions, because that was what I had based love off of. And I see that a lot. It's so common, and you look at it, and it's like, yeah, don't do that. But when you're in it, I don't know. Like, nothing anyone can tell you makes it better or makes it go away. And you think that they're the problem, because they're telling you that you're in a bad relationship. And you're like, well, I'm going to marry this person. And I did. I was engaged 3 years ago, something like that, when I was in the cult. And I definitely was just like not living truthfully to myself. And I didn't even say yes when he proposed. I just said, okay. I said, sure, I think. I knew we weren't actually going to get married, because I would not have done that. But if someone doesn't like your partner, it's like, well, I chose this person, so I'm going to make sure that we stay put. And we weren't together we were together like 2 years. And it was so hard. Like, I left the cult and I left him within like a month's time together. And I don't know if something uncovered in me that was like, you have got to just do better. You've been wanting to do better your whole life, and this is your chance. And then I did. And now I'm actually with a really good person, really similar beliefs, and calm, and not this back and forth, high highs, low lows. It's just it's always stable.
What has helped you stabilize?
Not taking advice from people that I don't want to be like. And obviously the yoga. And I think, I don't know, age, that could be a part of it. Like, you'd have to grow through things to go through them. I've always been an old soul. I've always been told that from, little bitty. And it's like, thanks, that's because I've been traumatized my whole life. That's why. And I've always hung out with older people. I think it's just not caring what other people think about me has been like a really big release. Because, in the cult and in my childhood, it was like, well, everyone has to think I'm perfect, right? Like, it's me, hi. And then now it's like, well, if I make a mistake, that's great, because now I can learn from the mistakes. And I embrace my mistakes now. It's like, look at what I did. How silly is that? And not taking things too seriously. Because everything always works out. Everything always works out. And it might not seem like that in the moment. And there's like this little parachute that I now keep with me. It's like, if it feels like I'm falling, it's like, well, it's going to work out and it's going to catch me. And if it doesn't work out, then I guess I'll die. And then, I lived a great life so far. But it's crazy because you don't remember how painful things are. Like, you can remember, like, that was terrible, but like your body can't bring up the pain physically. Like, if you cut yourself, it hurts, but you can't remember that. And it's like that, from childhood until I would say 19, 20. My life was just like a rain cloud. And it was so sad, and I was so depressed, and had no purpose for happiness. I thought that the world was inherently bad, and people were inherently bad. And then, these last 5 years of my life, there's still been some bad, but it's like this, it's crazy. I think that I've had a good life, even though this whole time before that, I think it's more just the energy you put out into the world. I'm really trying to make a difference and help others and empower them too, because it feels so disempowering when you come from trauma and you come from shit and you don't feel like there's anyone that can actually understand you or hear you. And it's like, well, that's okay. Do the yoga. You'll probably feel better. And if you don't, that's okay too. There's so many other ways to heal yourself and make yourself feel like a better person. And I'm fascinated with people's stories. And obviously you are too, with hearing people. And just like the root cause of life and like bullshit is just parents and like their parents and then their parents. And it just keeps going on. And like we were talking earlier, like I don't want children. I don't have a desire to have kids. And I've never wanted kids either from like a time as a child. Like
that'll break the cycle.
It will break the cycle. It will. And I'll just love my pets endlessly. Give them all the goodness. But I do teach in schools and stuff, teach yoga to kids. And maybe that's like the cycle too, breaking. But just not having my own, that has never sounded like a good time. And they always say, oh, you'll change your mind. You're only 25. It's like, well, I've never had the thought to do it. And if I do, I just don't think I will. But never say never, right? That's what they always say. And that's what I've always said. Like, I never thought I'd be in a cult. Never say never. Yeah.
Do you think the chaotic childhood you had kind of led you to make those kind of decisions?
Oh, 100%. I think that I feel like I've had a good innate sense of like right and wrong. I'm a Libra, like, balancing scales. And I don't know, yes, no, maybe so. It's hard too to think like the trauma has rooted itself in such different ways than like my brain injury has. So it's like, I don't know where my memory problems stem from, if it is from the brain injury or if it is from the years of trauma. And so it's like, well, since my brain's maybe not wired correctly, is that what led me there, or is it the past? And I think maybe it's just both. It's like a collection of everything. Nothing's just, I say this, nothing's black and white, but I do live a very black and white life. I have a very hard time being in the gray area. I want to, but I find that when I'm too far in the gray, that's when I got myself in trouble. So I gotta like have my own sense of, yes, trust my gut and just stick with that. Yeah, no, that's a good question to think about. Like, what led me there? What's led me anywhere? Was it all choice, or was it like some predetermined idea in the world? I don't know. Because when things are good, they're great, and then when things are bad, they're really bad too. But I've been in this really good calm sense or baseline sense.
For how long?
Honestly, my partner, now, ever since we met, I mean, he holds me to a high standard too. And then, like, we are very good at telling each other if something is not right. There's no gray. It's like, well, let's fix this issue that we're having. And I think he holds me to such a high standard of love, like unconditionally, that I've not experienced before. Last December, so almost, a year ago, I guess, I went through a really, really hard time. It was only for like 3 weeks, but it felt, I had been in this really high bubble, opening up my own studio and living a good life, and then it just kind of came crashing down. It's honestly, writing my book has been bringing up a lot of stuff, and I was really trying to focus on that, and I think I went too far on it. I was just sitting there writing, and I didn't take breaks. And I didn't want to leave the house for like 3 weeks, and I was struggling, I was sick, and didn't bat an eye. Totally there for me. And it's so hard for me to get like the fear of being sick, because my mom, again, sick. She never had a good day. It was always something's wrong. And I don't know if that was real or fake. But even coming here, the paranoia about getting COVID or getting sick, or if I have a trip coming up, it's like, oh God, please don't let me get sick. Or I will try, wash my hands and not living in complete paranoia all the time, but it's such a rooted thing that my plans are going to get messed up because someone's sick. Because as a kid, my basketball games, they would happen and my mom would say, I'll be there. And then what happens? Oh, I was sick, so I can't. And it's interesting with my partner too, he's got such good parents, like a really good family. And they're amazing, and they like love me too. And they don't ever have these problems or these thoughts. And if he gets sick, it's like, oh, everyone goes to take care of him. No one resents him for being sick. And I feel like I was always resented for being sick as a kid. Even those years, that I was bedridden from my brain injury. It's like I wasn't even allowed to like fully enjoy that time to heal because I can't be sick. And my dad definitely has taken on a lot of that. I can't imagine being married to my mom. Like, the abuse he went through too. I watched him try to be killed by my mom twice. And so he has definitely taken on a more masculine approach to the healing of just, brush it off. And recently, like, I've had some heart issues, and I was telling him, I think I need to go to the doctor for this. He's like, oh, you're fine. And it's always, you're fine. And maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But I think he's so scared about getting sick too, or someone being sick, or me having any kind of gene connection to my mom. Because I did this blood test recently too about this gene mutation that I have, and I have it. And I told him, and he was like, well, I can't have that. I was like, you probably do, because it comes from both parents. So I don't think he is able to view that. And that's okay. Maybe that's just not his journey. I have definitely learned a lot from him. We were not cool until like, probably, again, since me and my current partner have been together. I didn't talk to him. I refused to see him. I really just did not like him or agree with, excuse me, any of the choices he was making, which who cares, right? Like, he's a grown adult. But recently, I've actually like not dreaded going to see him. So that piece of the world is healing too. So I'm just very curious to like where my life is in a few years, if I'm still in this really good place or if it goes back.
Maybe we'll check in with you in a few years.
Right, yeah.
All right. Gabrielle, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I wish you lots of luck from here.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.